How Julius Caesar trapped. Two armies are coming for Julius Caesar at the same time. One trapped inside a fortress, one racing in from the countryside to crush him. He does the most insane thing possible. He doesn't run. He builds a battlefield out of dirt, wood, and time, and forces both enemies to fight him on his terms. This is Alesia, 52 BC, in Gaul, modern-day France, and it's one of the clearest demonstrations in history of what command really is. Not shouting orders, not heroics, control. Control of space, control of information, control of morale, and control of the clock. By this point, Caesar has spent years campaigning in Gaul. He's won battles, taken cities, broken coalitions. But now, the entire region is burning in a unified revolt under one leader, Vercingetorix, smart enough to avoid Caesar's strengths and aggressive enough to force him into mistakes. And Caesar has made mistakes. He's had setbacks, he's taken losses, his supply lines are stretched, winter is coming. If he gets trapped deep in hostile territory and loses here, it's not just a battlefield failure, it's the end of his army's credibility and probably the end of his political future back in Rome. So, when Vercingetorix withdraws into a fortified hilltop stronghold called Alesia, Caesar faces a decision that defines everything. He can walk away and keep maneuvering, or he can lock the door and turn this into a fight the enemy can't escape. He chooses the second option. Now, quick thing before we go deeper. If you like the kind of videos where we break down how great commanders think under pressure, why they choose risk, where they stay disciplined, how they turn chaos into structure, hit subscribe and drop a like. It tells the algorithm to feed you more of this exact flavor. And if there's a commander or battle you want to see dissected like this, throw it in the comments. I'm always hunting for the next "how did this even work?" story. All right, let's build the trap. Caesar's strengths are not mysterious. He's fast, mentally and operationally. He makes decisions quickly, then commits to them fully. He's also unusually good at reading human behavior, allies, enemies, his own troops. He knows what morale is worth, and he spends it like currency. But he has blind spots. Caesar is a gambler. He's willing to bet everything on a plan if he believes the structure of the situation favors him. That confidence can look like genius until it turns into overreach. At Alesia, overreach would be fatal because Caesar is not facing one opponent. He's facing two, Vercingetorix and a large force inside Alesia, sitting behind walls with stored supplies. A massive relief army forming outside, gathering tribes and warriors to smash the siege. If the relief army arrives and Caesar is still unprepared, he will be attacked from both directions at once, pinned in the middle, outnumbered, and far from Rome. So Caesar does what he always does when the situation is unstable. He makes it smaller. He reduces the enemy's freedom. Alesia sits on high ground, with slopes and valleys around it. It's defensible. It's a place designed to punish attackers. Caesar looks at it and decides, fine, then I won't attack the walls. He'll starve them out. That sounds simple. It is not simple when you're surrounded by hostile countryside and the enemy can build an army behind you. So Caesar begins building what can only be described as a machine. First, he creates an inner ring around Alesia, trenches, ramparts, watchtowers, an engineered barrier to prevent the defenders from breaking out. Then he does something even more controlling, almost paranoid in its logic. He builds a second ring facing outward. Two fortification lines, one to keep the enemy in, one to keep the enemy out. Caesar is literally preparing to be besieged while he is besieging someone else. And it isn't just walls. The Romans dig deep ditches. They shape the approach routes. They plant traps, concealed pits, sharpened stakes, obstacles designed to break a charge before it reaches the line. They force attackers into narrow kill zones, predictable paths, places where discipline beats numbers. This is not glamorous warfare. This is labor, engineering, fatigue, logistics. And it's Caesar saying, I will not let your courage decide this. I will let your constraints decide it. Inside Alesia, Vercingetorix watches the ring tighten and realizes what Caesar is doing. He's buying time by spending sweat. And Vercingetorix responds with his own control move. He sends riders out before the ring fully closes to raise the relief army. So now the clock starts ticking. Control starts long before contact. The best commanders don't just fight the enemy. They fight the conditions that make the enemy dangerous. The relief force finally arrives, tens of thousands, possibly more, spread across the hills and valleys outside Caesar's outer ring. Inside Alesia, Vercingetorix has his own large force ready to strike outward. Caesar is now in the most hated position in warfare, caught between two forces. This is where most commanders lose control. They start reacting. They start chasing threats. They start spending reserves too early. Caesar's answer is cold and methodical. He treats the siege lines like a system, and he uses his troops like components in it. He stations units along the rings. He builds rapid communication, signals, runners, predictable rotation points. He creates local commanders who understand the plan without needing constant supervision. In modern terms, he's building operational resilience. The system can take hits without collapsing. Then the attacks begin. From the outside, the relief army probes the Roman lines, testing, looking for weak points, trying to find where the ring is thin. From the inside, the defenders surge out at moments meant to sync with the outside pressure. It's a coordination problem for the Gauls. Two forces need to strike at the right time, at the right place, hard enough to break the line. It's a control problem for Caesar. He must prevent a breach anywhere, because one breach becomes a flood. For days, the fighting is brutal and repetitive. Assaults, repulses, night attacks, feints, exhaustion. The Romans are defending fortifications under pressure from multiple directions, exactly the scenario those fortifications were designed for. But still, this is where discipline cracks if it's going to crack. And then comes the critical moment. The relief army identifies a section where terrain reduces the effectiveness of the Roman works, where the line is harder to anchor and easier to mass against. They commit to a major assault there. At the same time, Vercingetorix attacks from inside to pin Roman defenders and pull reserves away. This is the moment Alesia becomes a single point on the map, a place where the entire war compresses into one decision. Caesar's key decision is simple to describe and hard to execute. He commits his reserve at the exact moment the enemy believes the line is about to break, and he turns defense into attack. He doesn't just plug the gap, he counterpunches. He sends fresh troops into the threatened sector to stabilize it, then launches a coordinated strike, often described as using cavalry and mobile units to hit the attackers at an angle, forcing them to fight while compressed, tired, and unable to maneuver. The effect is psychological as much as physical. The attacking force expects the defenders to collapse. Instead, the defenders surge forward. That flip defense to offense is the heartbeat of control, because once the attacker loses momentum, their numbers stop mattering as much. Their coordination frays. Their courage becomes isolated, individual, and therefore easier to break. The relief army begins to retreat. Inside Alesia, the defenders realize the outside pressure is failing. Their own breakout attempts lose hope, and the siege machine keeps tightening. Control isn't never being in danger. It's keeping a reserve of troops, time, and options, so you can choose the moment the battle changes direction. After the failure of the relief effort, the situation inside Alesia becomes hopeless. Supplies run down, morale sinks. Vercingetorix has to face the truth. The relief force has done what it can, and it's gone. No second army is coming. And Caesar's ring is still there, silent, disciplined, unmoving. Eventually, Vercingetorix surrenders. Whatever you think of Caesar politically, militarily, this is a masterpiece of applied control. He took an enemy advantage, numbers, and made it irrelevant by forcing the fight into engineered funnels, time pressure, and exhaustion. The fall of Alesia effectively breaks large-scale organized resistance in Gaul. It doesn't mean every fight ends overnight, but the center of gravity is gone. Caesar has proved he can lock a war into a decisive outcome, and that matters because Caesar's story is not just great general wins battle. It's the story of a commander who understands something most leaders don't. If you can control the environment, you don't need perfect information. You need a system that doesn't collapse when information is imperfect. That's what those double fortifications were. A system. Victory often comes from making the enemy's choices smaller and smaller until they're choosing between bad and worse. When people say command presence, they usually imagine charisma. Caesar had charisma, sure, but Alesia is not a charisma victory. It's a leadership victory built on three things. Structure beats panic. When pressure spikes, unstructured organizations melt. Caesar's siege wasn't just a wall, it was a plan that every unit could understand and execute even when exhausted. Time is a weapon. Caesar didn't just fight the enemy, he fought the calendar. He forced Vercingetorix to spend supplies and hope, while Rome spent dirt and sweat. Reserves are not optional. The moment the enemy thinks you're empty, physically or mentally, is the moment you lose control. Caesar kept something back so he could decide when the battle turned. In this series, we study command under pressure, how the great commanders made decisions when the map was messy. The stakes were personal, and one wrong move could erase an army. Not because we want to cosplay ancient wars, but because the logic of pressure, fear, fatigue, uncertainty doesn't change. Only the tools do. Next time, we're moving to a commander who treated the battlefield like a chessboard made of lightning. Napoleon's most brilliant battlefield decisions.